Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the ATI Podcast. Barrett here, Josh back in the saddle, and we've got a very special guest with us this week, and that is WES HOFFMAN. Wes, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're doing fantastic.
Doing great, man.
Happy to have you, Wes. And this has been something I've been looking forward to for sure. And I kind of wanted to detail with our audience kind of how we usually start our conversations with our guests is how we come across them, their work, and the things that they do. And that was through the work that you did with the 314 Punk page. Specifically, I saw, reels of venues and local shows that you were putting up,
Sure.
singles of the week, albums of the week, things of that ilk, kind of just like promoting up and coming artists and heavily leaning into St. Louis specifically. And that's something that for sure that is kind of the spirit of our show and the things that we try to do. So I felt like there would be a kinship and was interested in talking to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys having me, and I appreciate what you're doing with highlighting people in St. Louis and beyond as well. So, yeah, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I know that you've got multiple irons in the fire. You've got your own musical endeavors that you're diving into. You're doing the 314 Punk stuff, and I know you've had varying responsibilities with that over time. You've also had podcasts, have a new podcast coming out. We're going to get into all of it today. Kind of where I wanted to start things, of course, everything's centered around music largely that we're going to be talking about today. So where did the love of music start? Was there any key moments, influences, peoples, persons, bands? What would you kind of point back to in time where it was, I need to do something in my life with music?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've always been a big music person. Like my mom growing up, she majored in music and played the piano and sings and still plays the piano and sings. And now she teaches my nieces and nephews how to play piano. And growing up, it was probably when we were around 4 or 5 years old, she started giving me and my sisters piano lessons. And we started, my mom was always singing songs to us and with us. And there was always music playing, I felt like, in the car and stuff like that. So, I've never really been without that influence in my life. But when I really kind of got tired of piano around the same time that I got interested in the guitar. So the piano was kind of like boring to me, and I wasn't really I think I was too young to really understand like how to make my own music with it. I was just like reading music and playing other songs. And when I was about 12 or 13, I got a Christian music sampler called Seltzer, and it had this band called MXPX on it. And I didn't even know how to say like the name of the band. Like,
right.
I thought it was like Mix Picks or something like that. And they had a song on there, and I thought it was so cool. It was faster. It was like a little bit more aggressive. The guy sounded like he was like kind of pissed off about some stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is really cool. I've never heard anything like this. And looking back now, the song wasn't even that fast of a tempo. It was just faster than anything I had ever heard. And around that time I had started playing guitar. I mean, this was probably like, mid 90s, 95 and 94, 95. And I was taking lessons, and I brought like some of the MXPX stuff and Blink 182 stuff to my guitar teacher. And he was probably like, oh my God, like, are you serious? Like, because he was teaching me like how to read music and these scales and like how to improv and stuff. And then I'm bringing him a bunch of stuff that's just like straight power chords, So,
Sure.
um, shortly after that, I started a band in high school. I was from a really small town, so like there weren't a lot of people around that were into the same kind of music, or let alone like played rock music.
Yeah.
But that was really my entry point. And then, when I got into kind of like early college, I met some other guys. I met our bass player who plays in WES HOFFMAN and Friends with me now. Um,
Okay.
Literally, it'll be 22 years tomorrow that we met. Um, he was in a
Wow.
different band, and I was in a different band, and we were right at that crossroads in our life when we were like 18. We both had just graduated high school, and so we started a band called, you might know this, it's the Livingston Project.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember that. Like we were after I left the band, they kind of turned into like a Thursday type like
Yeah.
metal core band, but
Hmm.
that would have been like early 2000s. So, and then I honestly, for like several years when I got like into my early and mid 20s, like I didn't play music for like 8 years. I didn't even pick up a guitar. I was just kind of like, that part of my life is done. Like now I got married at the time. I bought a house. I was doing the adult career thing, and
Yeah.
I didn't play for a really long time. And, it wasn't until 2015 that I started playing again with a friend. I rented a studio here at Encapsulated Studios, and then in 2017, Wes Hoffman and Friends was born, and we kind of went from there. So, yeah, that's the brief history
Yeah. Yeah,
of
man.
my
Sounds
of
like
my
you hit
music
it
career.
all. And since we're kind of already there, as far as the Wes Hoffman and Friends, and out of curiosity, well, let me back that up because you said something earlier that I was actually kind of interested in. You said you were from a small town, and what town
Yeah,
was that you're from?
Vandalia, Illinois.
Okay,
Vandalia.
yeah, very
I've actually
familiar with
heard
it.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we've had some friends who had relations there and things like that. So like that's how I'm familiar with it specifically.
Right.
But so Vandalia, Illinois, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, we kind of, or at least I actually was born in St. Louis, and I have a lot of family up there still yet. But in the flood of '93, we lost our house, and so that kind of
Oh
forced us to
wow.
like relocate. So my parents had family in the area, which we're now kind of like within 40 miles of each other. So that kind of became the convenient thing, like move to your support system. And
Sure.
we basically ended up down here and been down here ever since. But my wife, our kids, and stuff, we go up to St. Louis pretty routinely to do stuff outside of visiting family. So we're up there all the time. I know, Josh, you have a lot of family up in the St. Louis
Oh
area,
yeah.
in-laws, stuff like
Yeah.
that.
My
So
dad, my in-laws, all my in-laws are up there, and my dad's family's all
yeah,
St. Louis people. So yeah.
yeah. So that's kind of how St. Louis kind of still pumps in our bloods nowadays.
Yeah.
And you'll hear perhaps the lovely train in the background because of the amazing setting that we have. It's kind of
Yeah.
perhaps
Usually
the
that's about
mystique of it.
time. Usually it's
Yeah,
later than
usually
this.
it's a little bit later, but summertime, man, they got that chat to move. We're right in the middle of the lead belt,
Yeah.
you know.
We got to deliver that lead.
Yeah, so yeah, we're used to the small town mystique. It's a little bit smaller and a little bit more laid back down here, but not too far away from the St. Louis
Yeah.
area. How far is Vandalia from St. Louis? I don't
It's a little
recall.
over an hour. It's a little over an
Okay,
hour.
that's not
Just,
too bad.
just it's a straight shot on I-70. I was actually just up there on 4th of July to see my parents, and
Okay.
but I didn't really, man, like I grew up on a farm prior to like until I was like 16. So right until around that time that I was
Yeah,
kind of like coming of age, so to speak, or like kind of figuring out the things that I really liked. And I always kind of I loved growing up on a farm when I was a kid because like we had
yeah,
horses, we had pigs, cows, like it was just like it felt like a big huge giant. We had four-wheelers, and my dad and my grandpa in the wintertime would like they built us like a massive swing set and a water slide, and we had a pond that was like treated with chemicals so you could swim in it and it wouldn't grow moss and all that stuff. So like I had a really cool childhood growing up on the farm, but like then when I got older, I was like, we're so far away from everything. Like
sure,
the nearest town is like 10 miles away. If you ever, and I kind of got a little like, I remember feeling just like, oh my God, we're out here in the middle of nowhere. Like once I
sure.
got older and kind of got my bearings of things,
Yeah,
and everything that's happening that's worth going to is really far away.
right.
So now I've lived in St. Louis now for or nearby for close to 20 years. I lived in like Collinsville, which is just across the river, for 10
Right.
years. And then, I've been back in St. Louis now for a little over 3. So, um, and I like a little bit of both. I find that, like, if I'm in the city for too long,
Yeah.
my girlfriend loves to hike and be out in the middle of the woods and stuff like that. And if I'm in the city for too long, I feel the need to go where there's like not any noise,
Right.
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 So I feel the need to go out into the woods or the country and just like, let's go
Yeah.
for a hike. Let's go where it's quiet. Like, let's just kind of get away from the noise and from all the people sometimes.
Yeah.
But,
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally understand that. Like when and I can relate totally kind of to the coming of age tale that you gave, and that is like, being in a small area, you're like, oh, I'm going to get out of here. I don't want to be around this. And I think a lot of that had to do with like, I was uncertain with myself, what I wanted to do, who I wanted to be, those sorts of things. And once I got older and started to have my own family and things, like kind of priorities change, but you're like more at peace with yourself.
Right.
Mhm.
So like you're not so like concerned with being in the middle of the hustle and bustle. And I'm not saying like, methodically, I was like, I need to keep myself busy and I need to move to the city or anything, perhaps. But I think a lot of that had to do with just me being comfortable in my own skin,
Right.
And so I can kind of relate on some level with that. Another thing I wanted to ask you, Wes, too. You mentioned, your mom being a musician as well. What kind of music is she kind of into? Like, is it more classically trained type stuff? Is that kind of what you grew up around her doing, or?
Yeah, definitely more classically trained type music.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm trying to think of. Well, my dad really liked to like even old stuff like Nat King Cole, kind of Frank
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Sinatra.
Classic.
My dad was really into
Yeah.
stuff like the Doobie Brothers. Like old like
Yeah.
Rush, old rock. So my dad was kind of
Yeah.
Steppenwolf was one of his favorite bands. Like growing up, we had and like. They would get me sometimes. Like my family was really religious, so we listened to a lot of Christian music too. But like every once in a while, they would get
Sure.
me like my dad would get like an Eric Clapton greatest hits or something, or we had a lot of
Yeah.
tapes like that kind of laying around. So I definitely as I started playing the guitar, I was definitely more interested in music that was like had this guitar making this
Yeah.
sound that was like that I didn't know how to make
Right.
but sounded really cool.
Right. Yeah. And again, I can relate to that because I grew up in a pretty like strict religious upbringing, especially
Yeah.
until I was like about 17 or 18 when I finally started like getting out of my own and having my own experiences. And
Yeah.
we like there was a point that like we could only listen to Christian music too, even though like I'd go to public school and I would hear like Limp Bizkit and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And
Oh,
I'd be
yeah.
like, oh fuck,
Corn, Julian
I want that album. Like I would like trade things so I could sneak it home, like so I could have Corn. Like I remember when Issues came out, I'm like, I'll trade you this hat to some kid, and he was like, all right,
Yeah.
just so I
don't
could get
listen
that
to
other
it. That's
music.
okay. Here you
Right,
go.
right. And this is of course before like internet piracy and things like that even. So
Yeah.
it was like,
Ripping
CDs specifically
Yeah.
you had to have in your possession, or you like tape stuff off of terrestrial radio,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually had that thing from Home Alone, though. You know what I'm talking about? The
yeah,
gray
those
thing.
toy.
talkback.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually have one of those. Got it for Christmas. I love that.
That's
thing.
awesome.
I recorded
Yeah,
so
that's
much
amazing.
music with that thing.
I love it. It's interesting how that religious upbringing, like I've talked about this a lot with the guys in my band, and like, we don't have to go super into it, but it's interesting how much that shapes you as growing up, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
As you kind of like get
definitely.
older and like, I don't consider myself a religious person now. Like I am
No,
my own ideas of spirituality and my own beliefs and everything, but it's interesting
sure.
how a lot of that stuff, like that's how I got into MXPX, you know what I mean?
Right,
That's
yeah.
like, and how a lot of those things that you used to believe or that you were like kind of those beliefs that were handed down to you, how they affect you now, and how you kind of, in my like early to late 20s, I started to kind of deconstruct and thinking like,
Yeah,
I don't know if I really believe these things that I've been taught all my life, or, kind of
right.
taking different things from it. And then also listening to a lot of punk rock, you hear a lot of different ideas and ideals from
For sure.
those guys who are singing that stuff. And a lot of it's not, a lot of people, like, your parents want you to stay away from it because it could be a
Right.
bad influence, you know what I mean? But like, now you get
Right.
older and you're like, okay, I get it. I get what like these guys like Joe Strummer were singing about, and
Yeah.
get what like the guys from Bad Religion are talking about, and like I get it now,
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
you can relate to it, right?
for
Yeah,
sure.
and it's funny, like some of the things that they would teach against. I mean, it's just ignorance on some level, lack of knowledge. But it's funny to like think like I would, in my church and the denominations that we were in, stuff like United Pentecostal Apostolic, it was like pretty strict, like dress
Oh,
code
yeah.
and that sort of stuff. And it's just funny, like the things that they'd speak out against. But then actually, whenever you kind of had those secular experiences, you're like, it's really not like what they think it is, or that they're
Right,
preaching about.
right.
Like, like a band like the Descendants, like they would think that that's devil music. It's like, hey man, this guy's like talking about growing up, basically, like
Right.
going
Yeah.
to college and things like. It's like there's nothing. It's pretty wholesome.
Different
the
isn't
themes,
evil.
really. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy, like once you kind of actually start to have those. I had a professor in college one time, and it was funny enough. I think he kind of leaned more in the closed off world ways of thinking, but he said he had made this analogy. Once you get to college, he kind of gave us all the spiel in the first day. He was like, your worldview is this right now, and he kind of used his hands, as a
Yeah.
visual. And he goes, as you start to go to college and you start to learn from people and meet new people, your worldview is going to start to do this, and you're going to see things in your periphery that you didn't see before and realize things. And actually, it was kind of apt. Like, that's really what happened for
Right.
me as I started to
Yeah.
break out of that bubble.
Yeah.
And
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, staying in that little bubble, in that little like narrow vision, is like that to me, that I felt like that was hindering my personal growth. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I think we
I agree.
need to try different things. We need to experience different things instead of just being told like, don't do this because it's wrong, and it's if you
Right.
do this, like it's a slippery slope, more, that type of thing.
Right.
So I think it can be more detrimental to your personal growth than, like opening up your mind to bigger ideas and ideals, So
100%. Like, how
I don't
can
know
you
we were
know
going to
that
go
you
down this
have?
whole road, but I'm
Hey.
here for it,
That's the show, man. That's what we do, man. We like to have real conversations, But yeah, man. Like I just feel kind of like there's a lot of kinship here, and that's always a good thing in a conversation. And I can relate to a lot of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Small town lifestyle, growing up in the small town, for sure can relate to that, especially with religious experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's talk about kind of like some of the first shows that you started playing, because now I can kind of see it through your lens a little bit better, kind of knowing your background. Like,
Sure.
That had to be pretty eye awakening. Like once you actually started like gigging out, like playing your first gigs with your bands that you had. Like, kind of tell me, do you remember your first show and like what that experience was like? Was it a shit show? Spill the tea.
Yeah. I definitely remember my first show. We played in Vandalia. It was a show that I organized because I've always been kind of one thing about me is I've always been the person that's like, in every band that I've been in, that takes the lead on like booking, let's get merch, let's do, like, I like the bigger picture of the band of like, hey, I think we could get signed to a label. I think we should tour. We should tour with this band. I've always been the person that's like making the connections and building the relationships with people. So, even early on, I was the one who was like booking shows in my own hometown because, at first, like that's the only place that we could play,
Right.
And so we played a show at this place called the Barn in Vandalia. It was our church's like basically all-purpose building. It was like a gym.
Yeah.
And we had an older band that they were a couple years older than us. They had already graduated high school and everything, but they were still living in town. They were called Kick In Emergency. Maybe you've heard of them, but they were kind of bigger back in the day. And then we had a band from like the next couple towns over called Briar Fox, and they played. And I kid you not, there was close to 200 people at the show.
Oh, wow.
Because
nice.
And I even see this to this day, is when you hit towns that are smaller, like a Cape Girardeau or a St. Joseph, Missouri, or Carbondale, there's not much to do in those towns as opposed to like St. Louis or Chicago or Nashville. So there's not a lot of competition. So when something cool happens, it's like everybody goes,
Right.
there's a place in St. Joseph that it's called Skate Bar, and it's one of those places that like no matter who's playing, there's probably going to be 50 people there that night, no matter what. And because it's like a club, it's like the cool place to hang
Yeah.
out. You know, it's where all the skateboarders and punk kids go. So, yeah, that was our first show, and that was our first show that I ever really played in front of people that felt like a punk show. And what you're talking about, like the first show that was really eye opening to me was I came down to St. Louis and saw MXPX in 2000, so I would have been 17. Um, it was December of 2000, and then they came back in February or March. But I remember being, because they were my favorite band. They're still one of my favorite bands at this point in time. Like,
Yeah, they're good. Good band.
I'm happy to say it. Like, Micah Herrera has become a friend of mine over the last few years and everything like that, which is really cool.
Very cool.
That's awesome, dude.
I was actually just on his podcast a couple of months ago too. So,
Nice.
but yeah, it's really, I got to meet him like several years ago. We hired him to come out and do like a keynote speech, and like ever since then we've kept in touch. But when I saw that show, and I went and saw them, I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how it was at the pageant. I didn't know how big this venue was going to be, but I was like, I remember being there and looking around and thinking like, oh my God, these are my people. Like in my hometown, I'm one of the only people, like I'm one out of 5 people that even know about this band. Because this is way before, you know, like the internet became like so accessible. And even before like, you know, media piracy was like really a thing, like Napster was still just taking flight. And I remember thinking like, there's 2,000 people here that like, we all have this in common, and it's this music. And like kind of at home, I'm a little bit of an outcast. Like people think I'm weird, and I wear my hair all spiked up, and I wore the big like Jinko style jeans when I was like in high school and stuff.
Hell yeah.
But here I'm accepted. You know what I mean? And that to this day has always stuck with me a little bit, is that like, especially now that, you know, my band has been doing a lot more touring and stuff like that, we're going out of town, is like, I feel accepted when I'm in these venues and these places with these people. Like there's some kind of common thread that binds us all together. And I think that's really cool.
Absolutely. And like, I would say like the most spiritual experiences that I've even personally had, and coming from a guy, you know, with the religious oppression, we'll circle back on that.
Yes.
But the most like spiritual experiences that I've had actually is the exact scenario that you're talking about, is going to shows and relating with people that I've never met, but we're here for a common cause, and that is to support these artists that we all enjoy. And, you know, sometimes it's a varying bill, you know, so some people are here to see certain bands, whereas you might be here to see a different band or whatever the case is. But, you know, that's the opportunity, if you're not familiar with the work, or you just know it at a glance, to kind of get in deeper and find things that you like, and then again relate to other people that you never met before. So that was the thing that attracted me immediately about going to shows. Like it kind of started with local shows a little bit more so for me, I would say, because we would throw local shows down here in the Farmington area, and there's a place called Barbarino's.
Yep, definitely.
Which is pretty popular. Yeah, Joey O'Farrell used to book shows there all the time. He's kind of from our area as well. We've had him on the show previously.
Joey's a good friend of mine. Yep.
He's the man. Dude. Yep, the man. And we would, you know, I'd go and I'd see bands, and some kids I went to school with, Last Flight Home, like they were just like, we looked up to them. They were kind of like, you know, idols to us as kids.
Oh yeah, I was a huge fan.
And they were a few years ahead of us, and we would, you know, go to shows and just like freak out. And like once I like got the opportunity to play with them, I thought I was really doing something.
Yeah,
you know, like I was like going places. And I just remember kind of those hallmarks of, you know, circling this back into playing music too, not just going to shows. But, you know, once we started playing in St. Louis and other places in the Midwest, and, you know, that reward of that instant satisfaction that you get and feedback, you know, from people, like you feel like you belong.
Right.
So I would say like my most spiritual experiences relate around music specifically.
It just hit me like everybody that's at the show is connecting with the music.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's why you're all there and you're connecting. I mean, there might be people that are like, you know, don't connect with one specific band or something like that. But everyone there is like connecting to that. So you know that like you're all connecting to this one singular point, which is the music. So you're all connected through that. And
Right.
it's a really cool thing because you feel like, oh, hey, we're all here. We're all like here for kind of the same reason, which is this music. And like, even if you don't like this one specific band, you're kind of here for like, we are the outcasts. We are the people that maybe don't fit in and don't want to follow the status quo. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? So that's where and to feel that like acceptance and community and is really a beautiful thing. And I always say at all my shows, like, no matter who you want to be and no matter who you are, like, no matter like anything, because there's so many different dimensions of how we're diverse today.
Right.
So you can be whoever you want to be at this show right now, and that's how I always felt growing up at shows.
Yeah.
And, I never felt like I had to hide. And other places at other points in my life, I felt like I had to hide different dimensions of who I am, and I don't want people to feel like that way at our shows. I want them to feel like if there's ever one time where they can be who they want to be, it's at a WES HOFFMAN of WES show.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any, bigger byline than that specifically. And I know that I want to get back into kind of some of, your varying experiences and things too, because I know that you've been in other projects in the past, and I don't want to pass up what you're doing right now. Specifically, we got a chance to listen to some of your music, and I want to pick out a few things there that I kind of noticed, as well as the podcast that you got going on. But didn't you, I believe recently, whenever I listened to For What It's Worth, with WES HOFFMAN, your new podcast, you had mentioned that you were like in a metalcore band in 0405. What band was that?
It was a little short lived, but it was called Shots Rang Out. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Okay.
We opened.
Sounds very familiar.
Yeah, we opened for a band called Ed Gein, which is like a grindcore metal band.
Yes.
We opened for the Acacia.
Definitely know who that
is. We opened for the Acacia Strain, which is insane to think about now because they're just huge. But this was back in like 04, 05, and they put an album out in 06 that just like catapulted them to the top of like that scene. But we played a lot of shows in we were all from the Illinois side. So Edwardsville, I was living in Highland, Illinois at the time. And so we played some shows in like on the Illinois side too. We the Highland VFW was doing a lot of shows at the time. And again, a small town that like, hey, when the one thing happening in town is going on, there would be 200 kids at these shows sometimes. It was incredible. So, and then like Belleville, there was a Belleville Art Center that was like doing shows at the time too. So, I was like the clean vocalist and the like we had a singer who did all the screaming, and then I would do like the pretty sounding vocals like on the choruses and stuff. And then I would we also had a guy that was like super technical on the riffs, and I would do more of kind of just the like raw, every metal band has a good guitar player, and every metal band has like an okay guitar player. You know what I mean? And I was the okay guitar player. I hear you. But dude,
everybody's got their role.
Everybody's got their
role. We jumped around and like we totally tried to copy some of those bands like Story of the Year that were like just popping off at the time. Like we do all kinds of karate kicks and like I was like a lot. This was 20 years ago, so like I had the long emo hair coming down like down the side, and I would like my girlfriend at the time would like. We'd go shopping together and in like the same section, like, cause I'd buy girls' jeans and she'd like help me pick out the right size and everything. Cause I was just like a skinny little kid back then. But yeah, that was the look back then though, man. That was what was up.
It was for sure. That Highland mention reminds me that we played quite a few shows out at the Highland VFW Hall as well as a band called We Were Statues and Worlds. So we played a lot of shows with bands like Masada Complex. We played a show with a band called Plagues. They're pretty like heavy. But the first show that we played out there was just the scenario that you talked about where it was like 200 people plus showed up. I think there was like 5 or 6 bands on the bill. And that was a bit of drive for us. I want to say it's at least 2 hours or so
from where you're at. Yeah, live. Probably.
Yeah, and we had to take like 2 cars because nobody had a vehicle big enough to like because we were running full stacks
Right. You
and
try
all
to get
that
all the
shit.
gear there.
Yeah, and it was even just as a 4-piece. So we had 2 guitarists, a bassist who was the vocalist, and me as the drummer. And it was always we had to like kind of run like a wagon chain up to any show like that was far away up until the point that my mom got a van and I was like, hey mom, I'll borrow your van for the weekend.
Yeah.
We were able to put everything in there, but yeah, those Highland shows, man, a lot of good memories up there
Oh,
for sure.
absolutely. Yeah, I think we played there twice, and I had went to a bunch of shows up there as well because I didn't live far away. So
Yeah,
I think Spitalfield may have played. Maybe that was before. That might have been before they were doing
well,
shows
they're
at
like
Highland.
from the Carbondale area.
Yeah, I
wanna
think
say.
so. Yeah.
And they're getting ready to do like a 20-year anniversary show. I think.
Yeah, I think
they
they
just
just played
did.
in
They
St.
just
Louis,
did.
didn't
Yeah.
they? Yeah.
Just did.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
incredible, man. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry I missed that one. They used to
Yeah.
play down here quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, good guys for sure. And whenever I listen to your your first episode, I should say, Wes, for what it's worth, too, I think you had made a mention of how in some of these like local music scenes they kind of get oversaturated with like bands playing all the time. I'm just kind of
Sure.
paraphrasing a point that you made. I think that's kind of what happened there in that Highland scene, but it happens in St. Louis. It happened down here in the
Happened in
Farmington
our
scene.
scene, right?
Yeah, where the same bands were playing all the time. And I think, taking away from what you said in that, not to make too hard of a shift, like I think a lot of bands could like learn from that today, not to oversaturate your market and take some of those weekend trips if you can, even if it means playing less shows, getting out, playing new places, meeting new people, making new connections and that sort of thing, and like spreading your social circle.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that um, going back to earlier in the conversation, I've said that I've always been the guy that's like pushing the project forward and stuff like that. And I think like with a couple of years ago when I started releasing singles off of our EP, Rewrite the Story, I remember that I had went through a divorce and separation. Me and my wife separated and right before COVID, and I started writing these songs to kind of like get a lot of that out. And I remember thinking like, okay, I'm gonna try to write one of the best songs that I can write, and that song ended up being "What's Left of Me," which is like our most listened to song on all platforms. And like at the time, that was the best song that I could write, and I'm still really really proud of that song. But I remember thinking, if I'm really gonna do this, um, again, if I'm really gonna like start writing music and releasing music, I want to do this strategically. I don't want to just be playing all the time. I don't want to just take whatever offer. And I think and I remember thinking I'm gonna just see how far this project will go if I actually, even though I'm like at the time, I was like 37 years old, I'm gonna see how far this will go. Um, and I think with that, you have to start thinking about like, when I get offered shows, I start thinking, okay, when is it? What else do we have around that time? Who is it with?
Right.
You really need to evaluate like what is the purpose of me doing this? How far is this going to get me? Is playing a show? And sometimes you take a show because you want to just play for fun, and that's great. But when you start doing that too much, you don't.
Right.
People start kind of feeling, and especially if you're promoting more than one show at a time, people start seeing, oh, well, they're playing July 1st and they're playing July, 18th. Well, I can see them either time, so I won't come to this one, but I'll come to that one.
Right.
Or, so I started getting I started really looking at what bigger bands do, and bigger bands don't. You look at a band like Story of the Year, perfect example. Like, I mean, they're way, way bigger than anything that I'm doing. So I'm not comparing myself to them by any means. But how often do they play St. Louis? Maybe twice a year.
Right.
So far this year, they played St. Louis one time, and we're halfway through the year. They might play one more time. And if they started playing every month, like the first couple times, there'd be a lot of people there. But after a while, people would start being like, oh, well, I can catch them anytime, and I've already seen them 3 times in a row, so my wallet's kind of hurting because I'm going every time. And so I'll take a few months off. And then, so, I mean, and that might not be like Story of the Year actually might, if they played once a month for a year, they actually might do pretty well. I don't know. But like, I don't think as a local band, started thinking just, hey, maybe if we keep it to a minimum, more people will show up, because then we're only playing, every 3 or 4 months or something like that. So, and there's
Right.
also a lot of, you know, I, I also want to rephrase this too. Like this is all very fluid, and it's not a one size fits all thing. So if you're a band and you're listening to me, and you're,
Sure.
I had a friend who was in a band, and he told me, a couple months ago, I went to a show, and he was like, dude, I'm just going to be straight up with you. He's like, I am totally okay with just being a local band and like playing whenever we want to play. And I'm like, okay, great, dude. Like, then you know what you want. You know what you want, and you're doing it, and that's
Yeah.
awesome. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so it's not, it's, some bands just like to play, and that's great, but strategically,
Right.
I feel like if I want to get as many people as there as I possibly can, I need to space it out. And I love to play, and we love to play live, and we have a great live show. We jump around, we get the crowd involved, and now we're at a point where, especially when we play hometown shows, like people know the words and they sing along and stuff like that. Um, so I definitely feel like our live shows are really special, and I want to keep them special. So I also feel like there's a lot of places like Cape Girardeau, Carbondale,
Yeah.
Columbia, Missouri, Springfield, Illinois.
Yes.
The Quad Cities is not very
Absolutely.
far. Kansas City is 3 hours and 45 minutes away. Springfield, Missouri is like,
Right.
it's kind of far, but like,
Yes, sir.
Indianapolis is 3 hours from here. Like, there's a lot of places that if you are looking to branch out, it takes a little effort, but you can book shows at those
Sure.
places. I think aside from Springfield, we've hit every place on that I just mentioned. Both of it, we
Yeah.
haven't played Springfield, Illinois, or Missouri, but we've hit like Bloomington and stuff like that. So there's other places around that
Right.
you can play that then help you expand your fan base. You know what I mean? Like, so you go to Kansas City, you
Absolutely.
play in front of you get paired up with a bunch of good locals, and you play in front of 100 people, and maybe some of those people will come see the one or two shows that you play in St. Louis, or maybe you're just branching
Right.
out a little bit more, you're getting more people to like listen to your stuff. And, so that's really when I kind of sat back and started thinking about, how could I really make this the best that I want it to be? Just taking time to think about about how many shows we want to do in our hometown, and how close they are in vicinity. And every once in a while, like we had
Right.
played, we in February, we played a hometown show that was the end of our tour in February. And then like we got offered to play with our friends in Keep Flying, um that we had played with them before, and they're all good friends of mine from way back in the day. And it was only 3 weeks away, and I was like, even though we just played here, like, we'll open for them, and we'll support them, and get some people out to that. So
Yeah.
so there are exceptions to that rule. Again, I want to say it's like
Sure.
it's all a
Sure.
very fluid thing, but like, I am a big
Right.
believer in like space out your shows. Go away for a little while so that people have like, if you play a really
Right.
good show and everyone leaves
Right.
there thinking, oh my god, that was fucking awesome, I really enjoyed that show, I had a great time, then
Yeah.
like, they're going to be looking for the next time that you play, and then the next time you announce it
Right.
is,
Right.
oh shoot, they're playing like in 3 months from now, like I definitely need to get back out there again. Or on the flip side of that, oh shit, I
Yeah.
missed them, like I definitely need to get out to the next one. So it's really like just very simple supply and demand and marketing.
Sure. 100%. Yeah. You don't want to oversaturate your market, and absence makes the heart grow fonder in many cases as well.
Absolutely.
So, we're not insinuating anybody should neglect anybody,
Right.
but
And again, that's all just
West,
my
you
opinion.
very
I don't want, if anybody's listening to this that's like disagrees with me,
sure.
like that's totally fine. Like, that's just my opinion and
Right.
how I do
Yeah,
it.
I mean, really, it has to do with like, what are you trying to do?
Right.
That's what you need
Everybody
to ask
has a different
yourself.
goal.
And you made a good point earlier, like the friend of yours that's fine with being a local band, playing as much as possible or whatever in the local music scene. That's great. And if that's what you want to do, and I'm not like trying to say that incredulously or like dismissively, but that's you know what you want to do. Actually, I find that to be awesome.
Right.
Personally,
Somebody knowing what they want, right?
You're doing what you want to do. 100%. I mean, I've got friends that are in their 40s starting brand new bands in the St. Louis area, and I think like we commonly have conversations between us and our friend circle. I'm like, man, I hope I fucking do that too.
Yeah.
That I want to have that spirit, still yet in seeking out playing new music and playing out for people. So, yeah, you just really have to ask yourself at the end of the day what you want to do, what the strategy is. And I think, if you're looking to expand your audience and, getting some notoriety outside of a local music scene, kind of some of the stepping stones and the advice that you've given, I think is very important to consider without question.
I totally agree with you. Like knowing what you want is like literally half the battle. And most of the time, even most of the time when I've known and planned out, like, okay, I think I want to do a tour, like, I wouldn't say the minute I started, but like when I decided, hey, we should probably do a little like weekender. A few days later, somebody reached out to me and was like, hey, do you guys want to do a weekender with us? So like sometimes things like that, there is a weird, not to get too woo about it. Just some kind of alignment or like a signal goes out to like, oh, maybe someone else is thinking that same thought, and it definitely works. I mean, it's a very similar thing with like, I have in my notebook here in my studio, like I've written down goals for our band for this year. And I wrote them down last winter, and I can honestly say we've crossed off most of those goals already this year, and we're only halfway through the year. So if you don't know, on the flip side of that, if you don't know what you want, you're just kind of, saying yes to everything, or like, just kind of floating out here, not really. And I've had points in my life where I've been like that, where I've just kind of felt kind of aimless and lost and don't really know what I'm doing. And, I'm kind of like, okay, especially in my professional career, like when I have a shitty job, I'll be like, okay, where did this go wrong? Like, what is it that I really want to do? I don't like what I'm doing right now. So like, what is it that I would really want to do in my career? And every time that I've gotten clear on that and gotten clarity, then the strategy almost like just kind of unfolds on its own.
Right. No, I agree. You always have to assess kind of what the motives are, what your interests are. And, you kind of mentioned kind of some marketing talk or whatever. That's kind of like 101. Like you're going to get projects in that sort of thing where it's not going to be a passion project for you, especially if you're doing things on a certain commission or whatever the case is. And it goes into whenever you're doing things in your personal life, such as a band, you like don't have to do those things. You get to make those decisions too. So again, I like your idea of actually like writing down goals because, to have them in your head, sometimes, you can kind of get inside your own head. You can forget things. I think there's something to like, it's like you're almost actualizing it to an extent. You're manifesting it once you start putting things on paper or putting things out there. It's like you're holding yourself to a certain accountability too. So I think that that's always a good thing too for folks to employ without question. We hit on and kind of mentioned in passing some of your music already, Wes, and singles that you have out there. I want to say, like the first time I heard What's Left of Me, I'm like, man, this is like a punk rock anthem, like, a pop punk anthem specifically.
Thank you.
Like this is like hitting all the hallmarks of like, this is pop punk. If somebody was to ask me, give me an example of pop punk, I've never heard it, I would play that song. Kind of thematically, some of the things that you're talking about in the song is often, things that are in pop punk music. For what it's worth to me, that's again, kind of another really good, I would consider it almost a ballad of sorts, just obviously because of the dynamic of, the guest vocalist work as well. But I think like your music too, and me listening to it and really trying to pay attention to the lyrics and what you're saying, while it has the elements of, popular pop punk music and things, dealing with thematically kind of angsty stuff and themes or like, but it really seems like you're focusing in on the mantra of the glass half full still yet. Like, I think you have like a positivity sprinkled in there. Like, for example, What's Left of Me, like you kind of detailed kind of what was the driving force of that song earlier. But even whenever you said in my darkest hours, I found my power, it's, you're still finding that silver lining in situations, in trying situations. And I mean, like, I think that's just a great message to have in your music too. And I didn't know, obviously what the story was behind some of your music too before talking to you today. Um, but I was going to ask, how are you coming up with these concepts and
Sure.
inspiration to write some of these lyrics? But obviously, you're drawing from some personal life
Oh,
experience here.
absolutely. 100%. 100%. Yeah, I really kind of got serious. Like I said, I really got serious about writing. How do I writing every aspect of writing? So, having a good intro, like what you said about what's left of me, having this intro that's gonna grab you and like kind of pull you in. So many people have told me just even that first chord in what's left of me like draws them in, and I love
Yeah,
that, and so I love that fast skate punk beat, and then like the
yeah,
lyrics are kind of like you don't actually my the guy who owns our label, Jumpstart Records, he told me, he was like, you're in your music, you're like kind of the Get Up Kids do this a lot. Like you're telling a story, but the listener doesn't know all the details, so it's kind of vague, but they can also kind of relate to it. You know
sure.
what I mean? They can also kind of, you can
Yes,
relate to like,
yes,
in my darkest hour, I found my power, and
right,
you can relate to these things. So, that was, I really
right.
started to focus on melody as well, and lyrics. I really
Yeah,
wanted, if you listen to all five of the songs on Rewrite the Story, um, I wanted every song to be a song where after hearing it one time, it would get stuck in your head, or you would at least know, like,
yes,
remember one part of it. You know what I mean? I wanted them to all to be very
yeah,
catchy and very like infectious in a way. And I am a
yeah,
very positive person. Like I'm naturally just kind of look at the bright side, like almost to my girlfriend would say, like almost to a fault. Like I always expect,
yeah,
I can see, I've worked as a life coach and a motivational speaker and stuff like that. And I feel like I can always see potential in people. Like I can always see that,
yeah,
and that also can be very frustrating because it's like, oh my God, I can see that you can do this better than what you're doing.
yeah,
But like, I also am just always kind of the optimist. I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I always like to have in situations think, oh, this will work out. Somehow it'll work out. All my life, even when things have been really shitty, they've eventually worked out. You know what I mean? Like even through my divorce, and
yeah,
like, I was with my ex-wife, and we're all on, she and I are both on great terms now, so I don't have any problem talking about this. But like, even after 12 years of being together, you get divorced and you think, oh my God, like, even though that's the best thing for both of you, and you both agree that it's the best thing for you, you're in this like just kind of chasm
yeah.
of like, how is this going to turn out for the better? You know what I mean? But just holding that little
Sure,
spark of like, I
Right.
know it will.
sure.
I know, even though things are so shitty right now, I know that like I have hope that things will eventually get better. And now I'm
Yeah,
in like a much better place, and my through all of that, like focused on my band, I focused on myself, and really like taking care of myself. And I lived alone for 2.5 years, and that was really, I really needed that time and space. Um, but like now I'm in a place where like
sure.
everything's going really well with my career. Everything's going really well with my band. Me and my girlfriend just moved in together. We have a great relationship. You know what I mean? So, but in the middle of all that, in the midst of all that, it's hard to see, you know what I mean? But if you can hold on to that
Sure.
like tiny spark of hope that like something is going to get better, then I really do think it will. That's how it's been.
Yeah.
Like again, it goes back to that like manifesting thing, and in your mind, like you're somehow
Right. Right.
pulling these like things to you, So
Right. Well, I've always been of the opinion it doesn't do you any benefit to just like focus on the negative, anyways. In general, like no matter what your situation is, like I've been very methodical in my past, with like trying situations. Okay, like my first question is, how do
yeah,
we fix this? And is this something that I can fix, or am I going to need outside influences or resources to help me achieve this goal. And I think like whenever you can automatically take a self-evaluation and realize what you're capable of handling yourself, that's actually a very strong suit. It's okay to say, I can't carry this burden on myself. So if you need help, whether that's through friendships or whatever your support system is, or that you need therapy, I mean, like that just can apply to so many different things. I think too, there's a lot of, I know at least, we're close, similar in age, all of us talking today. I think there's definitely like an element, whether it was directly implied or not, like you as young men, you should be able to like grow up and handle your business and, not need help, and crying's a weakness and, silly things like that. Right. But as you get older, you like realize these are very real things and emotions that people need to go through, and to move past certain things as well. And there's nothing unnatural about them, and it kind of, just this weird like conveyance of poster child masculinity, I guess, is kind of what I'm trying to equate to, like what we're always like dealing with, like looming over us. And hey, it's first world problems.
It is.
Right.
There's way worse shit out there.
But I agree with you. I think you're right. I think, our generation we were taught, boys don't cry. Suck it up, be tough, get over it. All these things we've heard when we were kids, especially like growing up in a small town, and you're being raised by other men who were raised that way too. Probably even worse. Like probably there was a little bit more physical.
Definitely.
Type exactly. And now we've gotten older and we've realized that doesn't work. That actually creates more problems when you bottle things up and you don't talk about it. You don't talk about it with your friends. And we were never. And again, first world problems, but like we were never taught how to talk about our feelings. So here we are, a lot of us like 30, 35, 40 years old, just now learning how to share our feelings. And when I was younger, it would just come out as anger. Everything would just come out as like somebody would frustrate me, and I would just like get mad and I didn't know how to stop, take a minute, like think about this for a second. Like, it wasn't really until I started kind of practicing mindfulness that I realized, okay, hey, it's okay. There is so much strength in like talking to people about your feelings and about your problems, and like not having to go through it alone, whether that's like your significant other or your best friend or maybe your parents or a therapist. Like, we have to get in the same way that I was talking about we were talking about getting your goals out. You have to get your feelings out. Otherwise it's trapped inside, you know what I mean? And that's all of those experiences that have, and all of like the trauma that we've experienced from little kids up to now 40 years old, all of that, if you don't get it out, it starts to mix like in your body, in your spirit, and like we start to cope with it in unhealthy ways. So like it really is true. My mom's a therapist, so like so you know what I mean. And I studied psychology in college and stuff like that, and I've always been really fascinated about like personal growth and spiritual growth and like learning that these things, and for me, music is that. Music is me getting a lot of those feelings out.
100%.
I was going to go back and say, because you asked you were kind of hitting on like where, because I'll bring it back around now. You're asking like where some of the music comes from, and I feel like I always write whenever I'm feeling kind of down, or kind of angsty or frustrated. Like that's when like it's easiest to write. And like the EP was a lot of that, stuff. And like now we have a new album that's getting ready to come out, and some of those songs are like much happier. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like I remember people were talking about Chris Carrabba from Dashboard Confessional, and like his first couple albums were very like he was going. You could tell the dude was going through a breakup. He was very like frustrated, sad, depressed, and then like after that he found all this success, and his music, the song hands down is about like going on a really awesome date with this girl. So it's like and that is still a really good song, but it doesn't connect with you as much of the like. Your hair is So if people connect with like, the
Right,
stuff that's
right.
a little bit more, downtrodden and kind of feeling down type stuff. So, that is where I'm at now as I'm trying to
Sure.
write, um, songs with that positivity sprinkled in, but that also have that angst and maybe a little bit of like, I'm pissed off at
Yeah.
you, but I'm going to learn to forgive you. And
Right.
I don't have to love you and I don't have to like be your best friend anymore. But like, I am pissed off at you. You did a
Right.
really bad thing and I'm letting it go. And this song is
Yeah.
for you,
Yeah.
you fucking bitch. No, I'm totally kidding.
Yeah.
I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I mean, just like so much stuff we're hitting on is drumming up stuff for me specifically, but the whole contextual, like a lot of what we're talking about is like catharsis essentially, and whether that's writing stuff down in a book, making music about it, talking to a therapist, like just having it out in the universe just does so much, and people don't realize it. Oddly enough, having this podcast and I get rewarded with conversations like we're having right now,
Absolutely.
real conversations with people, like that does a lot for me personally and my mental health too. So it's just it just depends on you, right? Like whatever works for you, and don't let anybody tell you that what works for you is wrong,
Absolutely.
because that's not the case either. Now, if you're Jeffrey Dahmer and you're out like serial killing
Yeah, if
people,
you're
that's a
harming
different
yourself
story,
or other
right?
people,
So
then that's
well,
maybe the line. But yeah, like,
yeah. So we kind of hit on, Wes, kind of some of what the lyric crafting's about and some of the inspirations that you had, and let's move into, because I don't want to, you're being very generous with your time, and I want to talk about some
oh,
other
sure.
stuff that you have going on too, and let's talk about 314 Punk. How did that start?
Yeah.
How did your involvement start? Is that something that you started? Is there a mission statement? Like, let's just kind of talk about the
Yes,
inception of that.
it is something that I started. You know, honestly, uh, it's been about 2.5 years now. So that I started it. Well, you guys probably remember STL Punk.
Yes,
Oh yeah.
100%.
STLpunk.com. So like when I first started putting out music in 2021, I put out a video and what's left. I put out what's left of me and a video for it, and I thought, I was getting a lot of like podcast offers. I was working with a publicist over in France at the time named Valentine, and she really helped me out a lot. We were getting on a ton of playlists. We were getting like within 2 months, I think we had 6,000 streams on this song. Like it went pretty quick. And I mean, it's a good song in its own right, but you can have really good music. And this is another thing that I see, like bands do, is like, you can have really good music, but if you don't have a plan and a strategy of how you're going to get it out to people, it doesn't really matter. There's really,
Right.
really good bands in St. Louis and in other places that I've been, like Kansas City, Chicago, but like they, they make they're really good at making music, but they're not very good at marketing their music.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I would say that's something that I am better at than the average person.
Yeah.
Than the average band maybe. I'm probably a better marketer than I am a musician. You know what I mean? So, um, I really know how to like market my stuff. So I thought about, I was getting a lot of play in like a lot of underground pop punk stuff, like playlists. I was getting on like a lot of blogs and kind of on the underground pop punk scene. But like
Right.
people in St. Louis, even though I'm from here and like I've played shows here and I've been in bands here, people in St. Louis still did not know, like, even that I had a song out and that I had all these
Yeah.
streams and anything like that. And so I was kind of thinking about like, what are the ways to get your music out? Like, I'm
Right.
getting this almost like global like recognitions where, but like how can I get um uh my music out to like just people in my own hometown? And there was nothing. There was literally, I mean,
Right.
I don't know how long you guys have been doing this, but this was back in 2021. There was
Right.
literally like no Instagram account. There was no Twitter account.
Right.
There the RFT sometimes does like features on
Right.
but not like there's not like a weekly thing or anything like that. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, why how hard would it be to just start an Instagram account and I can promote other bands on it. And of course I'll promote my band on it because I'm a part of the St. Louis
Sure.
music scene as well. And we don't have, if I am wanting something like this, then I'm sure that other people in other bands are
Definitely.
wishing that there was probably something like this. So how hard is it to start, an Instagram account and just start like reaching out to my friends' bands and like putting them on there. And honestly, at first, I didn't want people to know who it was because I wanted it to be kind of like a
Yeah.
faceless thing. I didn't want people, because I feel like people might think, oh, well, he's always just like promoting himself. And
Sure.
I'm not, but now
Right.
I'm not afraid to admit that like it is a platform that I created, and if I want to promote my stuff on it, I have every right to do that.
Absolutely.
Sure.
If you look at the number
Sure.
of posts that we've done, the ratio of like Wes Hoffman posts to not Wes Hoffman posts is very like it would be like 1 to 30, or I don't know, it would be very low. So like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I really wanted to promote bands, and I feel like we needed something like that central place where centralized place where you could go to
Definitely.
see what's happening in the St. Louis scene. You know,
Yeah.
so then last year I started having bands hit me up from out of town that were like, "Hey, we're coming through. Can you book us a show?" And I worked with Joey O'Farrell way back in the
Yeah.
day when I was in my early 20s, as well as like Justin Mank, who was a very big instrumental in like bringing many bands to St. Louis back in the day. And
Yeah.
he taught me how to book shows and how to run them as a promoter. So I've always known, and even going back to earlier in our conversation, I'm booking shows at the Barn in Vandalia. Like I've been doing this
Right.
like most of my life. So I started booking shows. We had some really good shows here. We had some like not so good shows, but I ended up making some really good connections through that. And it just got to a point where it became overwhelming this year. Of like
Yeah.
just everybody wants their stuff promoted. Everybody wants to be on a show. All the bands from out of
Sure.
town, like, we kind of got a name of, hey, if you want to play a show in St. Louis, reach out to Wes at 314 Punk. He'll make it happen, and I just, I'm 40 years old and I just could not be out at the sinkhole until 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and be doing that
Right.
multiple nights a week and touring
Right.
and having a full-time
Right.
job. And like,
Right.
and it's kind of like at what point am I, wearing myself too thin, doing these things for other people that like,
I understand.
sometimes you guys know how much work goes into a podcast. I was doing a
Oh
three
yeah.
and four punk podcast as well. You guys know how much work goes into this. Like, and sometimes people that haven't done it don't understand how much work goes into it. And so
Right.
there's not always um, that gratitude or that appreciation for what you're doing. You know what I mean? And
Right.
when that's kind of like not
Absolutely.
there, it's like, okay, why am I doing this? Like, I don't even feel like people care.
Sure.
you know, um,
Sure.
so
Sure.
it got
I
really,
mean,
it just got
there's a lot of people
difficult.
that do podcasts and can do podcasts too. Like it is difficult if you want to do it right.
Right.
I've heard people's podcasts out there that I'm just like, that's not something I would put out. I mean, fine if you're satisfied with that, but like I'm interested in having. I always like people that are like apprehensive about doing a podcast sometimes just because they might have a band and they're not like maybe social enough, probably a little bit more of an introvert where they don't think that they can do a podcast or whatever. I always tell them like this is good bar talk.
Right.
Like
Right.
we're not like slurring over our
Sure,
words
sure.
bar talk, but like meaningful. Like whenever you find that random guy at the bar that's like maybe playing something on the jukebox, you're like, hey man, I like this band too. And like, oh yeah, they're awesome. I saw them at such and such date. Oh yeah, do you like these guys? And then you get down that
Right.
rabbit hole of conversation. That's kind of like what I equate to this podcast too
Oh,
in many
absolutely,
respects.
absolutely. Yeah, and even my podcast, man, I will say this, like I don't have fancy microphones. I have a laptop and that's it. I don't
Sure.
really put a lot into. I do some editing and stuff like that, but I don't really put a lot into like you know I'm more about the content than I am about the production. You know what I mean? Like,
I
if
gotcha.
people really like
Yeah.
it, they will listen to, like, basically it's
Sure.
me talking to my friends on a Zoom call. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, but I will, I think St. Louis needs, what I kind of say going back to 314 Punk, like, I think we need more people to do things like that.
Definitely.
There's not very much, like, there's not very many people that are trying to just like champion the scene and promote the whole scene. There's a lot of
Right.
people that are promoting their own bands, and that's what you do. I get that. But like,
Right.
there's
Right.
not very many people that are taking it upon themselves to say, I want to promote the whole scene. I'm not going to be like biased towards who I promote. I'm going to promote
Definitely.
everybody. I'm going to tell everybody to go to all the shows, not just one. You know what I mean? And we were very 314 Punk is very specific about punk and hardcore and like emo and ska, the
Right.
alternative
Right.
side of like the music scene. I'm not really going to
Yeah.
get into like Americana and like, some of those other
Sure.
scenes that are happening.
Sure.
But I think that, and I have to say that starting that project, even though now I'm not I'm still am doing booking shows. I booked one on last Sunday night, and that was, it was very well attended. Was very happy with that. And then like, I have a couple others throughout the end of the year. I have a couple in August that I've booked for some
Yeah.
friends, and then I have like a couple. I think my last one's in October. So like, I still
Yeah.
have bands that are reaching out to me that I'll book. That because I'm just that kind of guy. I'm like, I
Sure.
look at it like this. Like, I'm a touring musician. We play more shows outside of St. Louis than we do inside of St. Louis. And when you're trying to book a show in Jacksonville, Florida, which I just booked a show there, it was very difficult. Many, many venues I reached out to, I don't know anybody there. So like,
Sure.
I don't know anybody there. I
Right.
maybe know a band there,
Right.
I maybe
Right.
know one band there. And so I reached out to them, and they were like, yeah, well, we might be breaking up. So like, we're not going to play, but he gave me the name to a bunch of venues. I reached out to all of them. I followed up. I was persistent, over the course of a week.
Yeah.
I finally got one of them to like reach back out to me and just today say, yeah, we have that date available. Like, I'll hold it for you. And they were even saying, like, that's kind of far out. I don't book that far out. And I had to kind of be like, okay, well, we're coming from St. Louis. So like, we want to book this now.
Sure.
Like, that's like,
Right.
this is part of a run. This is part of a whole run. So like,
Right.
um, but what would be really helpful is, like, I want to be that guy in St. Louis that's like, if I'm helping out a band in New York or Philadelphia or
Right.
Jacksonville, that when I
Right.
need help, you have this network of people that you
Yes.
say, hey, we need a show. And that's
Yes.
that has been awesome, because there have been those bands, like, now the first 314 Punk show that we booked, I am now going to go on tour with that band that came up and played here. So you know what I mean? Like, that it's a
That's
great way
awesome.
to make connections. And it's a great way to kind of
Yeah.
like serve your community by putting on these shows. But it also
Yeah.
takes a lot of work, and it's very physically and mentally taxing. So
Yes, sir.
um
I understand it totally.
but now we're at a point, I'm at a point with my band that, like, it really has grown to the point where, like, I can't put as much time and effort into 314 Punk as I would like to. I
Sure.
really just can't. So, right now I'm kind of just like sharing out stuff as I see it, trying to
Right.
promote
Yeah.
my friends' bands, and some of the bands that are coming through. Like, people still hit me up all the time. I get hit up, as, hey, can you help us book the show? And I'll say, hey, maybe reach out to Platypus and the Sinkhole and the Record Space, and like,
Yeah.
you know, I can point you in the right direction, but I don't have to do everything for you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Right.
that
Right.
even still goes a long
Definitely.
way with people. And
It does.
you know,
It definitely does.
now we're getting to a point where some of the places like Chicago and Kansas City, that now are kind of like our second homes, where we've played there like multiple times. At first, those were hard
Yeah.
to get into. You know what I mean? Chicago took a
Yeah.
couple times before we got a good show there, and then after you get one, you're like, it's the same with podcasting. Like after you kind of do it, you get better at
Right.
it, and then you're like, oh hey, well we've played there one time before, and that alone gets you a
Right.
little bit of clout of like, okay, you guys have been here, so like maybe
Yeah.
you'll bring 10 people, and then when you
Right.
go other places, you kind of people know your name a little bit more, and it gets out there. But at first, it's really
Yeah.
hard.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. You got to start somewhere. I know that. Did you start 314 Punk about the like COVID times? Is that about right? Timeline wise?
2021, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So I think, more specifically to hammer down on what I saw you doing and what alerted me to you to begin with was like singles of the week
Oh,
and
okay.
upcoming shows, those type
Yeah.
of posts. And I think I shared some of those and then you hit me
Oh,
back like,
yeah.
hey, thanks for the share. And I'm like,
I
absolutely.
appreciate that.
And, I kind of shared some of the stuff that you had going at the time pretty fluidly and repeatedly. And there was bands on there like that I was familiar with or was friends with or knew people in the band or was going to be on the podcast. Eventually I knew people like Fister, Direct Measure, I saw like on your list as well.
Yeah.
So I say all this to say that is the fact that the reason that you kind of started out and you wanted to be kind of like nameless and faceless, I think you did a good job of it because I had no clue like WES HOFFMAN was
Oh,
314
thanks,
Punk
man.
and all that stuff at the time. And that didn't really come out until we had some like correspondence back and forth. And then eventually you said, hey, this is me and this is the music I want to do if you ever need a guest, and it wasn't a matter of like shoving yourself down my throat. It was just like, hey, if you need help, I've done these things and I'll be happy to talk on your show, which I appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, dude, I've said this before because I've been on both sides of it. I have a
Right.
podcast where I've interviewed bands. Even I don't know if you listened to the For What It's Worth and heard a little bit more about my history in podcasting, but like, we've done Warped
Yeah.
Tour and music podcasts, and we've talked to like Store of the Year and Hawthorne Heights and Every Time I Die and all kinds of like way bigger bands. And doing the work that you guys are doing and the work that we've done, like where you're talking to bands and you're promoting them, that is just important as the music. Like it's just a different form and a different outlet of creativity, and it's just as important. And a lot of times I feel like the attitude of bands is, oh well, these podcasters and these media outlets just they should just promote my stuff, like almost kind of this sense of entitlement and no appreciation for like,
Right.
and I hear other, this isn't just me saying this, I've heard other publicists and people say like, oh yeah, bands just like,
Right.
I'll get them on this big ass playlist with 70,000 followers, and like they don't even say thank you, and I think that
Right.
the work that being a musician and making music and recording it and putting it out is just one part of the music industry. We need
100%.
podcasters, we need playlisters, we need publicists, we need producers and photographers and graphic designers, and they're all just as important to the product and the thing as the thing. You know
100%.
what I mean?
I
It all
agree.
comes together. Like it's all the bigger picture of it. And like I think anytime people I have an Excel spreadsheet of like media outlets that I've like reached out to and that I've talked to, and like every time somebody has me on a show, like I will share, if you're sharing my music and you tag me in it, it's getting reshared. Like probably if you don't tag
Right.
me in it and I find out about it, I'll still even reshare it because I appreciate the fact that you're
Right.
sharing my music. That's like
For sure.
that's the best thing you can do
Right.
for a band is share their music. You guys are literally like giving musicians a platform here. And like that's literally one of the
Right.
best things that you can do for a musician is help them get their voice heard. And it's
Yeah.
like it becomes and again, like this is my perspective, but this is also like I've heard this from many other people that are in the business. It's a very thankless job promoting other people's
Yeah.
stuff.
Right. No, I 100%. It is definitely a thing. And I kind of two follow-up comments on the subject matter. And that is whenever I was, in a band and playing, like I would have loved anybody to talk about my
Oh
band,
yeah,
period, let alone have me on a podcast.
yeah. I'd have been super pumped.
Yeah, absolutely. Or play my music or feature a clip of my music or reshare it on social media. Like, we kind of came up in right at the tail end of the GTP days, and then into like STL Punk you mentioned earlier, then like MySpace, like the infancy of MySpace and the launch of MySpace and the music feature of that, where you could add people's songs to your profile, and then that was kind of a promotional tool for bands too in the past. And like it's become so easy nowadays to promote people's stuff too. Like it's such it may seem like such a small gesture, but it really goes a long way. Like I know that there's like I'm a big fan of like improv comedians and varying types of comedians, quite frankly. But if I find like a good comedian that I like, or like a good drum reel that I like I will share that. And maybe somebody else will like that, or I just think that this person's ultra talented, and other people should see it and enjoy it.
That's why I like
and
stories.
So I try to do that.
Like I really think the story aspect of social media is so cool because it seems to be like more creative.
Yes,
you know what I mean.
I do too.
Yeah, and there's people that just sit there on that, and it's almost like a doom scroll type phenomenon, although it's slightly different. Is they will just like go through stories and watch people's stories.
That's the majority of what I do on social media.
Me too.
I'm not even gonna lie.
And I like stories because if like you guys shared, that I was going to be on the podcast tonight. And I shared it on my personal page, the For What It's Worth with Wes page, the 314 I shared it on all of them, and like it's gonna go. It goes away in 24 hours. So if it bothers somebody, and they're like, oh my god, he's posting about this, like. Then come back tomorrow. It'll be gone. Don't worry about it.
Right. Clean slate, right?
Yeah. And when I've released music on release day, especially for big release, when you do like a video or something like that, and I know that it's going to be out. I know that like multiple outlets are going to be sharing it. I will take that day off work or half the day or something, and I will share everything I'm tagged in. Every article, every post, every story, and I'll save it as a highlight. And because I don't want, like, it doesn't matter to me if people are annoyed that like, oh, he put up 50 stories today. Like what's this dude doing? I don't care. I want to look back at that and see, like, these are all the people that like shared it. And like, this is what happened on that day that we released it. Like, I want to see that, or like when we play shows, like I reshare it anytime somebody takes a video of us playing a show. Like I always reshare it because like I think that's cool and I want those clips for myself. So it's not always for I'm not always
everybody else.
Always for everybody else. It's like I'm sharing this because I like it. I want to see it. It's almost kind of like my little like digital scrapbook kind of type thing, So
yeah. Absolutely. No, I agree with that 100%. The other comment I was going to make is what's oddly going on in the podcast industry. And it's a part of like what kind of like killed some local music scenes. And that's like pay to play type stuff.
Right.
Where like people want you to like pay to have a band on your show or something. It's like, we're promoting the band. Like if any money's changing hands, like technically we should be paid. Not that I'm of the opinion that we don't do that.
We're not about that, but
yeah, we definitely do everything for free. But it's like it just seems like a kind of a backwards concept, and some of that goes on too, which is like ultra bizarre to me. Like that's even acceptable. Right. I don't, it's just it's a little off-putting. It almost kind of discourages you in a way too, to know that that's a thing.
Yeah, I'm definitely not big on I'm definitely not big on shows that are like that have the bands sell their tickets, and it's like, hey, you have to sell a certain amount of tickets to like play this show or make any money back. I'm more like I haven't played one of those shows in a very long time, and I have actually turned a couple of those down like recently because I have much better luck just promoting the show, telling as many people as I can about the show. And having them come and then like we've been really lucky that we've had like, especially at home, we've had like great turnouts over the last couple of years. I kind of understand where where it can get into, hey, you have this podcast, you're putting out episodes every week, you're really busy, I want to get on your calendar, like, here's $50. Would you guys are putting work into it. Like, would you be willing to, like, if I paid you for your time, would you put me on your platform? Like, like, there's some bigger podcasts that if there was a cost to get on the Lead Singer Syndrome with Shane Told, or to get on one of these bigger podcasts, like I might be willing to pay it if it's like, so we do, I think that's something that like, I do agree with the pay to play thing. Like, I don't think that's right. I think that like, I'm really big on like, this is music is a business. I want to get paid when I'm playing shows, especially if it gets to the point where like, hey, if every time we play in St. Louis, we're guaranteed to pull 100 people into your venue, like we deserve to get paid something. You know what I mean? I'm not just going to walk away and be like, oh, well, this show costs $10. Like, there's 100 people here. Like, where's that money going? You know what I mean? So like, and we have things to pay for. We tour. It costs money to rent a van. It costs money to put gas in the van. It costs money to stay at places. Merch costs money. Like, and so
physical media,
absolutely. Well,
you're paying all those upfront costs
for sure, and those things all cost money, and so it always just feels like the band is the last one that people think about to like pay. That music is so devalued now. You think about Spotify, and like Spotify is a great discovery tool for music, but
it's a marketing tool. That's what I always tell people.
You get 0.003 cents for every stream that you have.
Sure.
But it's like, I mean, at the same time, it's great, and like they don't have to. They could reject you and not put your music on their platform. But I understand both sides of it. But like, I don't know. I mean, if somebody was like, hey, Wes, it's $500 to like get to get your music played to 1 million people, and we will guarantee you that they will that these 1 million people will listen to this song. I mean, the possibility of that outweighs, like, you know what I mean? Out of 1 million people, let's say like a small percentage, 10%, like the music. That still might be worth it. You know what I mean? So those types of things, there are a lot of gray areas in music, in like the music business right now, especially with like playlisting. You know what I mean? Like now there's these services that are like, hey, you pay $15 a month and you can submit your music to different playlisters, and if you pay a little extra, like you can submit it to like these more elite playlisters, and we'll guarantee that they'll listen to it and give you feedback within 48 hours. And so there's a lot of stuff like that that's a little gray. And I've tried some of that, and I think it's really cool. I've gotten a lot of like listeners through that. I don't, but then there's other times where I'm kind of like, oh, maybe I paid for this thing and it really didn't like give me a good return, or it's like there's a lot of like, the music industry is very unregulated. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of weird things that kind of happen, and
it is.
So you really have to be smart about like what you're doing. And I think it's okay to try stuff and be like, okay, I tried this, and maybe it was $50 and it didn't work out, and I'm not going to do that again. Luckily, I've been doing this for like kind of a while, and there's certain things that I'm just kind of like, like I just won't play like a pay to play show. You know what I mean? Like if somebody's hey, we want you to.
Once we get our age, we've done it enough. It's like when you're 18, you just like look for an opportunity to play a show. Like you don't give a shit that you had to fill up the gas tank to go out to play a show. Like it's different times and different inspirations, but like you should be like, even then we tried to seek out like being reimbursed for gas at least if we had to like drive like 100 miles or whatever for a show. I think it's pretty reasonable, but as you get older, it's like you have to kind of pick your spots too. It's like you have life outside of playing music, just as you detailed. You got a big boy job, you're trying to promote other people's shows, you got your own stuff to play, record, so on and so forth. So you really just kind of have to like pick your spots and your opportunities.
Absolutely.
Too.
And I also think there's a lot, especially when it comes to touring, you have to invest a lot in your own band to tour a lot of times. Like going up to Chicago, like I remember our first little tour that we did, like our first little like weekender. We played a show in St. Louis. We played a show in Wichita and a show in like Lawrence, Kansas. And our guitar player, we were just going to go out to Wichita, play one show and come home. And he was like, doesn't it make more sense to do 2 shows if we're going to drive that far than to just do one. And I was like, oh yeah, you've actually got kind of a point. If we're
Right.
going to go that far, we should probably do two shows. So like you have to think about those kinds of things, like and
Definitely.
a lot of like touring is expensive, especially if you're renting a van or if you buy a van. That's like another thing. A reliable van. Like I could go out
Right.
and buy
Right.
a van.
Definitely. There's a
Right, I could go
difference.
out and buy a van for $5,000 right now, but who knows if it's even gonna give me the gig. But like, you have to
Right.
do a lot of that,
Right.
like kind of investing in yourself up front. And that's a hard thing for a lot of bands. Is like, you might go play you might drive 6.5 hours to go play a show, and there might only be 10 people there, and you
Right.
might not get paid very much money. But
Right.
like, but
Right.
we've also had those experiences, and I've learned from them, like, okay, I don't want to drive all the way up to Toledo, Ohio and have there be 15 people there. How can I keep this from happening next time we
Right.
come back? Like, do we just not go to Toledo, or we go to
Right.
a different city? Do we try to get better locals on the bill in that situation?
Different
Right, different
venue.
venue, that particular situation. The
Yeah.
promoter didn't promote it and get locals on it with enough time for them to promote. So now I
Right.
handpick all the locals that are on the tours that we go on. Like, for the most part, I ask for recommendations, but I look, do they
Yeah.
have a good social media following? Do they have a good Spotify listenership? Like, does in their photos, are there
Yep.
people at the shows? Those are all good indicators on whether or not that
Yes.
local is going to like draw, and like if they sound similar to what you look like. So yeah, it's a little bit of extra work on my end, but the shows are a lot better. Like, the shows are a lot
Yeah.
better now,
Right.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
know when I go to Chicago, when I go to Kansas City, like when I go to Philadelphia, I know that those shows are going to be good because, like, we learned from the bad experiences. But my whole point in saying that is a lot of bands
Definitely.
don't want to go through that. They don't want to take that risk. So, and it
Sure.
happens.
I think there's an element too of like what we're talking about today, that there's people that don't like even think about these things though too, and they don't realize the investment in becoming a band, especially if you have these goals, these aspirations. It takes people like you who's been around the scene to kind of give these, nuggets of truth and, wisdom too. And I don't think that, you know, and I can say this emphatically, when I was 17, started playing my own music with people. I didn't think like, how do I get people to come to a show that I'm going to go play in Champaign, Illinois? Like I was very short sighted in the sense that I was just worried about getting these songs down, getting the set list, time in the set list. If the promoter says you got 30 minutes, I want to be done in 29 so we can say, hey, this is us. This is where you can follow us. Give us enough time to talk to the people, get them to know us as well. Those were the things that I was thinking about it. But, again, have to assess what your goals are, what
Right.
your ambitions are too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things for me in music was, especially recently, has been just confidence. Like, I think my songs are good. I listen to them. Like, I don't listen to them all the time anymore. But like when that EP came out, I listen to those songs every day, like sometimes multiple times a day, because I think they're good. It's the kind of music that I want to listen to. It's that pop punk that like really scratches that
Sure.
itch for me. And when I really started believing in these songs and thinking, okay, these are really good songs, I got over the fear of asking people to listen and asking people to come to my shows. I started just texting people and be like, hey, like, will you come to this show? Like, I would love to see you there. Like, the tickets are $10. Like, I'll even send them a link to a ticket if they
Yeah.
say they want to come. Like, I'm not afraid to do that. And if anybody's like, especially if these are my friends, like, they're gonna either say, yeah, I want to come, or no, I can't make it. I've never had anybody be like, hey, stop texting me about your
Stop
music.
sending
You
this
know what I
shit.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
I've never
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
Yeah.
anybody do that, because I always do it in a very like genuine and kind way. But I think a lot,
Right.
I've talked to
Yeah.
bands before and they've said, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't like, there's bands that I've talked to that say, I still feel weird about asking people to come to my shows. And I'm like, okay, well then nobody's going to come. People aren't going to come. Like, you have to get over that.
Yeah.
You have,
Yeah.
or there's people that are like, they're like too
Definitely.
cool to like ask people to come. And I'm like, you have to get over
Right.
these like little ego things that like, you know, if you're afraid that someone's going to look at you as a like, you know, that think that you're not cool because you're asking that you're promoting your show, like, you know, I mean, you got bigger problems than, you know, than but that's how you get people out is like, I think that anybody who comes to our show will have a good time. And like, who doesn't want to have a good time? You know, like I can guarantee you'll have fun.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a big, you know, and I have fun at our shows, and I know other people have fun at our shows. So like, I want people to come, so I'm not afraid to tell people to come to the shows. And like, some people that might be a turn off for them of like, oh my God, he's always promoting something with his band. But like, you know, I feel like that's how you get out that, you know, it's gotten me to where I am now. So, which is farther than where I was, you know, a couple of years ago. So,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, again, you're just like giving all kinds of good advice to people that are going to be out there inspiring, you know, folks to actually go out and do their own thing. Want to make the point too, obviously, to have a good time at a show, you should, as it being your music, have a good time. And I think that becomes quite infectious. And, you know, I've seen some videos of your live performance and it looks like you're just having an absolute fucking blast out there, which is definitely alluring. I think, you know, even people passerby see that, it's going to draw people to come out to your shows as well.
I think the crowd definitely will draw off the performer. If you bring that energy, I feel like the crowd will return that energy.
Yeah, there's definitely a little payback back and forth. And Wes, again, I know like we're probably running a little long on the tooth for you. I know you got other things to do outside of talking to us all night long. But I want to. Good. I'm glad to hear it. I wanted to talk about your podcast. We've mentioned it a few different times that you've just launched. I think you got 2 episodes out right now. Is that right? Yep. Third one's on its way, and that's called For What It's Worth with Wes Hoffman, right? And people can find that on Apple Podcasts,
pretty much
Spotify,
anywhere.
The usual suspects.
Podcast, yep. Yeah. So I started that. You know, I've been podcasting for 9 years, like off and on, and like I first had the Strange House with my friend who was part owner of Strange Donuts, and then he left Strange Donuts, but we still kept the name, and that was the one that we went to a ton of music festivals, and we talked to so many bands, you know, new and old bands. I mean, that's MXPX, Bayside, State Champs, Neck Deep, Knuckle Puck, Real Friends. Like, I mean, pretty much almost any. We talked to Knocked Loose,
right?
So just so many bands so many bands that are kind of like on the come up right now, but also bands like Less Than Jake, you know, bands that have really like been around for a long time, kind of like those legacy acts. And so that was, we did that together for a really long time. And then I kind of branched off and had my own podcast to kind of support my business at the time, as like a marketing tool to kind of connect with people, but also like kind of, you know, just create content as well as kind of like a little bit of a, hey, you know, listen to my podcast, and if you need help finding a job, I can help you with that too, kind of type thing. And then I kind of rebranded that for a little while. It was called WES HOFFMAN with Friends. And I really, you know, I stopped. Then I was doing the 314 Punk thing for like a year and a half, and the podcast for 314 Punk was really taking up a lot of time. That between that and the booking and trying to put an episode out every week, sometimes, you know, every, you know, twice a week or just like once a month, I was like, you know, this is really getting like kind of cumbersome, and I'm finding myself like, you know, at the end of the day, just not being excited about it as much. But I am, but I just kind of had the idea of like, I still really want to do a podcast, but you know, I had people that maybe reached out to me that were not from St. Louis, and I was like, well, maybe it doesn't really make sense to have this, you know, Belvedere from Canada on 314 Punk podcast. Like, the audience is much bigger than just St. Louis that want to hear about Belvedere or a Wilhelm Scream or 10-foot pole or like those types of bands. So there were a lot of bands that I have met along the way that I'm like, oh, I would really like an avenue to like talk to them and talk to some of the bands that we've toured with, like Stay the Course, Bad Planning, Tired Radio, U Vandal, like to talk to some of these bands about what they're doing and what they're up to. So, you know, and it's also a great networking tool as well. Like, you know, you get to know, I mean, after how long have we been talking
For
for a
sure.
little over an hour and a half? Like, you talk to somebody this long, you get to know them. You know, if I ever see you guys in person,
Yeah.
like we've already
Right.
broken
Definitely.
the ice. You know what I mean? So having people on, you know, like
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
having different bands on and giving them a platform and saying, hey, you know, do you want to be on my podcast? Like, you get to know them, and that, you know, maybe you can help them book a show, or maybe when they come to town, we'll get to play with them, or you know, maybe when we're out their way, they'll play a show with us. Like, just kind of, you know, using it almost as a tool to like build relationships with people.
100%. 100%. And like I've actually become like really good friends with people through the podcast too, which has been a nice plus, you know, because dad life, I don't get to get out as much as I'd like to, you
Yeah.
know, and I miss that kind of social aspect of, you know, going out and to shows and meeting people, meeting bands, that sort of thing, playing with other bands and that. And so this kind of scratches that itch a little bit for me for sure.
Yeah.
And I can
Creative
definitely
outlet.
see that kind of conveying through your podcast, even though it seems like, you know, at least so far, it's mostly people that you have a familiarity with or you've toured with. I think the first episode might have been with Belvedere, if
That
I
the
remember correctly.
second episode,
Is
but
that correct? Or
the first one
who'd you have on your
was
first
with a band
episode?
from State of Course from Wichita, Kansas. That we've toured with a couple of times now. Yeah, they're really good friends of
Okay.
ours, and
Okay.
yeah, they're one of those bands that they were actually the band that asked us if we wanted to go like on our first weekender with them. They were like, hey, you know, they found us through unsigned pop punk, and they were like, hey, you know, we're playing a show in St. Louis. Do you guys want to play? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then he was like, you know what, man, like your music's really good. You guys want to come play with us in Wichita too? And I was like, sure. And he was like, do you want to do the whole weekender? And we're like, okay, you know, and with them, it was like literally, you know, they were
Yeah.
those types of the people that like, and I have experienced this a few times in my life that you just meet somebody and you don't even have to like try to build a relationship, or like you don't have to kind of like mince words. There's no small talk. It's almost just like this instant like, okay, we're best friends. Like, you just kind of don't have to try at all. You don't have to hide any
Yeah.
Right.
part of yourself, or like, you know, act a certain way. And that's how it is with us, with everybody in my band and Stay the
Right.
Course. You know, we're all just really good friends, and if we could do everything together, we probably would. But yeah, we can't play
Right.
every show with Stay the
Right.
Course, but like, we love those guys. So
Sure. Yeah, I've had a few of those instances over in my life playing music or whatever the case is, and man, they're just it's hard to come by in life, but whenever you do, man, it's like, you know, this is life. You know?
Right. Right.
You know, these are the things that I look forward to. And whenever you have those instant chemistries with people and so on, it's hard to put a value on it
it is.
without question. Uh, Wes, I want to delve into the portion of the program where we kind of ask our guests at times some random questions, some related to
Okay.
what their endeavors are and some outside of the box to kind of help our listeners get to know you a little bit better. I promise we won't be brutal on you. So I want to start by asking you if you could travel back in time, when, where, and why.
I feel like if I could go back in time, I would want to be the age that I am, but I would want to go back to like the early '90s and like 1994. I think like, you know, that's the year that punk broke with like Green Day and the Offspring and like all these bigger bands that were really breaking into like
Yeah.
the mainstream. And I was 11 years old at the time, and so I was like, I wish I could go. I wish I would have been like 18 or 19 or 20. You know what I mean? I wish that I really would have kind of been just a little bit older, to kind of
Yeah.
like experience that a little bit better. And I would have started a band and like, you know, tried to kind
Definitely.
of, you know, ride that wave a little bit,
Yeah.
a little bit more too. So, but you know, honestly,
Definitely. Yeah.
I'll make this short. Like, as fucked up as the world seems now, this is still the biggest. This is still like the most convenient time that we live in. You know what I mean? Like, we have shelter, we have the internet, everybody has like,
Sure.
I can literally like get a
Right.
pizza delivered at my door in like 20 minutes just by like tapping on my phone a few times. You know what I mean? I
Hell,
know,
you can
it's
do it from your
wild.
car now. Like my wife and her Pacifica has a Domino's app on the
It's
CarPlay
wild, man.
screen now. It's just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, we do live in the age of convenience. It is entirely different, and I think people have become so accustomed to it they wouldn't know how to operate otherwise. Speaking of pizza, I got to ask you: does
I
pineapple go
eat
on pizza?
pineapple on pizza, yes.
Oh, dude, you're my brother. You are my brother. We're
we
brothers.
differ.
No,
We differ, boys.
Yeah.
We differ.
like one of my favorite things to do is get something really spicy and then throw some pineapple
I
in
can
it
see
on
that.
pizza,
Yeah.
like
Like the
jalapeno.
spicy, sweet
Jalapeno,
aspect, I can see that.
When
Like if you're
jalapeno
drinking
and
some
pineapple,
beers or
hell yeah.
something.
That's
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, that used to be, especially when I was vegetarian, that was my go-to all the time. I was vegetarian for 7 years, and that was my pizza toppings of choice.
Pizza or
Jalapeno and pineapple.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah, 100%. All right, we're gonna get you in the feels right now, Wes. What's a go-to song for you to throw on to Ugly Cry to?
There is a song by The Lone Bellow. So neither of these are punk rock songs. There's a song by this band called The Lone Bellow that I heard on the day that I moved out. A friend of mine shared it on Instagram, and I listened to it, and I heard it on the day that I moved out of my house when me and my wife separated. And I can turn on that song at any moment of the day and like start bawling. And then there was another song, I won't listen to it. When I was going through the divorce and everything, and like the emotions were still really like high. Chris Cresswell from the Flatliners, you know that band, but he has a solo song, and I think it's just called. I think it's just called.
Yes.
Sorry or feel or something like it's a one word, and I can't. I will not listen to that song. Like it just. I can't. I listened to it like a couple summers ago, and it just started bawling, and I'm like I can't listen to this anymore. So, yeah. So there's two for you.
Yeah.
I've got a few, man. I know.
Well, here's that song now for you.
Let's cue that up.
Yeah. All right. Here's another one for you. Maybe on a little bit lighter side of things. What's the greatest gift that you've ever received, Wes? What would you say is the greatest gift that you've ever received?
You know, man, I that's a tough one. You know, I would honestly just, yeah.
Yeah, you can go so many avenues with it.
I mean, really, honestly, like, I would, like, the first thing that comes to my mind is, like, you know, just being able to, uh, you know, I really have to say, like, the gift the gift of someone loving you is a pretty amazing thing. You know what I mean? And I probably have to say that, like, uh, the gift of my girlfriend and my partner and like the love that we have together is probably the greatest gift that I you know what I mean? I don't physical possessions and stuff like can always be replaced, you know, but those are the things that you're like, okay, if this all of a sudden went away, I'd be really sad. So I would probably have to say, you know, like,
Yeah, definitely.
Somebody giving so much of themselves to you is a really powerful thing. So I love you, babe, if you're listening.
100%.
That's a great answer.
There you go. There you go. He's gonna have a hot meal waiting on him.
I was going to say he is not sleeping on the couch.
100%. If you could open for any artist of all time,
dude, I would have
be
to
and
say
why?
MXPX. They're just one of my favorite bands. Like,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
I know that there's like the Foo Fighters and you know the Beatles and the Ramones and all that. Those are all bands that, of course, I would love to play with. But like
Sure.
MXPX is like a band that is just so that like means a lot to me. You know what I mean? And a lot, and the other guys in my band too. That's like
Sure.
one band that we all were like that we all really listened to a lot whenever we were like younger. You know what I mean? So that's like a really big thing for us. So, and honestly, I
Yeah.
don't feel like we're kind of I don't feel like that. I feel like that's a fairly attainable goal too, even though MXPX isn't playing that much right now. Like they're not touring as much as they used to, but we're on
Yeah.
a record label now that they put a album out on, and they're planning the label owner was planning this really big show in Philadelphia later this year. I can't say much more about it yet, but like he told me that he was trying to get MXPX on the show, and I was like, I literally about shit my pants when he said that. Because I was like, dude, if you get MXPX, he's like,
Got
yeah,
lost
no,
it. You're like,
he's like, no, it's
holy
not going to
shit.
happen. I reached out already, and they said they're not going to do it. They're not going to be able to do it. He's like, but it was definitely in the cards, and I was like, ah. So yeah, we're not far. It's in it. It's not too far out of reach.
Damn. Yeah.
I did see that they're hopping on some like. Yeah, I think they have played
They're playing
some
Furnace
select
Fest
like
this
festivals
year.
and things like.
Yeah. They played.
God, what was the one I saw?
Furnace
that
Fest. They're playing.
Yes,
They're one of the
Furnace. Yeah.
headliners
Furnace
there, and they
Fest.
just played Festival in Canada. So yeah, they're playing some festivals and stuff like that, but they haven't done like a lot of like weekenders or anything lately. So, but maybe I'm sure they will next year because their new album is coming out. They just released it
Yeah.
today. That it's coming out on August 25th. So. I'm sure next year they'll be playing a lot of shows just like in support of the
Okay.
album. So if they come through St. Louis, I'll be waiting for that call.
Sure. Get on it, bro. Get on that. Last question for you. Dream lineup of a show, 4 bands, pick them. Can be from any time period. This is Wes Hoffman's dream lineup for a show, 4 bands.
Dead or alive? Or
Okay.
yeah.
No, are you asking?
Okay.
Can it be dead or alive?
Yes, they can be dead or alive.
I mean,
Yes,
I would have
yes,
to
sir.
say, I have to say the Ramones, just because they're like one of the godfathers of punk. It would have to be one of the like,
Sure.
Ramones of the Clash, like one of the big ones. And then I would probably say,
Definitely.
I mean, the Foo Fighters as well, probably, just because they're so big and they are to me, they're like the quintessential alternative rock band, Dave Grohl is just like an amazing
Yeah, I agree.
songwriter. I
Definitely.
He's been influencing music for so long, man, and people
so
don't even realize that.
for so long.
But anyway,
and influencing it on such a grand scale, and then I'd probably put
right,
Yeah.
right.
Blink 182, and I mean, just because that would be so fun.
Okay.
And Green Day. I don't know. These are always hard for me. Like I'm like, there's so many those are like the obvious answers because those are like huge punk rock bands. That and the show would be amazing. But like for me, I'd probably want to have MXPX and like, I think a really good show. I just answer that by like all the big bands, but like a really good show for me, I think would be like if it was like 4 or 5 bands that I would want to be. My band opens up, MXPX plays, Face to Face plays, and then maybe like the Menzingers and something like that. You know what I mean? Like and Bayside. Those would be if I was on a show like that, I would be like those are all bands that I love. I know every album. You know what I mean? Like those are I would be singing every word. Like that would be awesome.
Give you a chance to tell people where to follow you at, where people can catch your work at. I know we hit on some of that in the conversation, but just kind of round it out.
Any of the music
summarize.
stuff, if you just look up Wes Hoffman, I tried to change it to Wes Hoffman and Friends on streaming platforms, but I couldn't. If you just look up Wes Hoffman, that's where all my stuff is. And then on Instagram is where I do the most stuff. So it's at Wesley Hoffman on Instagram. And then the podcast is For What It's Worth with Wes Hoffman, and that has its own Instagram too. It's FWI WWES. So yeah, and then if you want any merch or anything like that, or you want to support us, it's weshoffman.bandcamp.com.
Hey, this is Josh from ATI Podcast. For show updates and news about the podcast, follow us on social media. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/ATI Podcast 22, on Twitter at podcast_ATI, on Instagram at the ATI Podcast, on TikTok at ATI Podcast. DMs are always welcome. Have a question for the show? You can always email us at atipodcastquestions@gmail.com. Stay safe out there.
This is Barrett from the ATI Podcast. Each week, Josh and I discuss current events, pop culture, music, TV, movies, politics, sports. Nothing is out of bounds. You can also tune in to learn about rising artists, small businesses. Whether it's music, graphic design, filmmaking, or even a brick-and-mortar mom-and-pop shop. We will be spotlighting folks and their endeavors. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Anchor, or anywhere you enjoy your podcasts. Just search ATI Podcast. We would like to thank you for your continued support, and as always, please stay safe out there.